before we begin, can I have a show of hands of how many are from a 2-year institution? Okay, and then how many from a 4-year? Pretty much the rest. Okay, that's great, because I wanted a majority of the 4-year, because you really do need to hear from the community college voice, okay? Because we're seeing a transfer population and trends that are going to directly impact you. So what we're going to do is cover some of those strategies that you may want to consider to be able to be, plan for and accept kind of the new learner and what we're seeing in the community college sector. So we'll go ahead and go over the topics that we plan to cover today. So we're going to talk about the new transfer cohort. So you heard in today's session, opening session, somebody referenced the adult learner. Somehow the adult learner kind of dropped off of the transfer conversation. The majority of institutions are looking for that direct entry student or the traditional transfer student who takes a couple credits at the community college and then transfers to the university. Traditionally, when we talk about transfer, it's that vertical transfer, but we're seeing that more than 60% of students are accessing more than one institution. So they're going to proprietary institutions, they're picking up prior learning, assessments, credits and courses that can be applied to degrees and certificates. So you're starting to see a change in a demographic. And once you start to see a change in a demographic, you're going to see a change in educational needs. And so that's what we plan to share with you is, how do you plan for that? How do you plan for that change? And what are you doing at your institution to influence those conversations? So as transfer leaders, as transfer advocates, what we're hoping you do is you take this information and you go back to your areas, your departments, your units, wherever you have direct influence, and start introducing these topics into those conversations. Because I could tell that as we go over this information, a lot of this isn't being talked about, especially at the national level. So I'm assuming it's probably not happening at the statewide level. So we're also going to cover access and career pathways, as well as personalization. So that's the buzzword in higher education, is that personalization. It's that kind of that Amazon feel where it anticipates everything that you want, and it, you know, you go on Facebook and you look up something and then all of a sudden there's like ads that appear. So it's that kind of customization and personalization that we can provide to transfer students to make them feel valued and mattered. We'll also cover some nudging strategies, as well as the reinventing of credentials. And so kind of what we're seeing on a curriculum level, what's changing, and how do we respond to that. That's another topic I think has kind of been lost during the transfer conversation, is it's based off of curriculum. So once you start to see changes in instructional design and curriculum development, that's going to have direct impact in terms of how do you evaluate that and how do you apply it to other credentials like a 4-year degree. As well as micro-scholarships. You're going to hear that more and more on not only the national level, but you know, at the institutional level in conversations, as well as globalization. So we'll go ahead and just dive into the first topic. So this session will cover those higher level themes and concepts, and then we could identify opportunities and strategies that we can use to influence transfer policy and practices. So as I shared with you, we're seeing a change in demographics. I don't know at your institution, especially at the university level, but at a community college level, we're starting to see more and more adults return to re-career and retool. And so from a community college perspective, we offer degrees and certificates, but it's an increasing number of certificates that are growing because not everybody feels like they need a full 4-year degree. Some people just go back to school to re-career, maybe get a job promotion and so forth. So you're starting to see a shift from the traditional age student to now the adult learner, as well as the anticipation and the projection is that it's going to increase more than twice as fast as the traditional students. So as you're sitting there, ask yourself, what is your institution doing to prepare for that new way of, those new cohorts that are coming in, and how do you best serve them? I know for Maricopa, and just looking at our marketing and our literature, the adult learner is nowhere to be seen, right? Your marketing folks probably say, we want something hip and jazzy and energetic, sexy and young, right? But there's no adult learner anywhere to be seen in promotion or marketing materials. So that's something to think about. You know, when you talk about the invisible student, like transfer students, the adult learner is the invisible students. And so we want to make sure that people are cognizant of that and taking that into consideration. So for Arizona, we have a large adult population, and you've heard this over and over again in research and different conversations, is that we have many adult learners who have some college, no degree, right? So there's a big pool of students that we could go out there and actively recruit. They should be accessing higher education and post-secondary education. So how do we do that? Are they involved in those conversations? Are they involved in your strategic plans? It would probably be a good idea to take a look at your strategic plans to see how do you recruit a diverse population. And I think when we talk about diverse population, we automatically focus on minority students. A diverse population are veterans, it's rural students, it's adult learners. It runs the gamut of pretty much everybody that we should be helping access higher education. So we have an initiative in Arizona to try to meet those goals, right? We want an educated workforce, and so we do have a coordinated effort and, you know, to set those goals and to try to increase the percentage of adults accessing higher education. And of course, everybody knows that the more educated workforce that you have, the more it contributes not only to the income, the personal income of those individuals, but also to the statewide economy as well as the national economy. So there is an incentive for us to try to, again, get those adult learners back into our classrooms and into our institutions. So what's the transfer twist on this? Okay, I know that many of us who are transfer specialists or are in the transfer functional area, we pretty much focus on transfer. You know, what could we do to improve the transfer process and services for students? But it's bigger than that. You're contributing to institutional goals like strategic enrollment management. How do we get more students in? Because I know that for many of us, we're seeing dips in enrollment or flat enrollment, or we're basically seeing that, ways of us not being able to retain students because we don't offer them the services or the support that they need. So this is a way for us to really see not only does it impact transfer, but it impacts other areas. Prior learning assessment. I did a presentation last year on prior learning assessment, and I'm going to keep pushing that agenda because it's not really reflected in our conversations. And you're probably wondering, well, how is it related to transfer? Well, if the community colleges are starting to utilize prior learning more, which is anywhere from standardized exams to military credit to portfolio assessment, if we start applying those to our credentials and our associate degrees, it has a transferability aspect because then if they go to your university and you have policies that say we don't accept that, it's going to have negative implications. So the higher goal in this conversation is to support learner mobility. So you have to find solutions that's going to not only support learner mobility, but that academic mobility, so that you can help create access, because it is a real access piece, and I feel like that has also been lost in the conversation. We like to talk about student success and completion, but what about access? What are you doing as a transfer advocate to create access? And I'm talking to you, community colleges, because we don't do a very good job at creating access and facilitating that transition into our institutions, because we're so used to being that sending institution. So we really relied on the universities to kind of create those transfer pathways to transfer the curriculum and do the articulation agreements. But now students are coming from us, from universities. So students who maybe didn't do quite well in the university come back to the community college and are accessing our doors. Or maybe it's that college, that adult learner who dropped out 15 years ago, and we have restrictive policies that say we will not acknowledge anything older than 10 credits. We make it so hard for people to complete degrees that I'm not surprised that we have these ambitious goals, because, I mean, if you go through your college catalogs, you could probably at least identify 10 policies that pretty much will prevent somebody from either succeeding or completing a degree. And I've noticed that in people's prior learning policies. I shared this with a pre-conference session that I presented at yesterday in terms of underserved students. Many of your institutions, I bet it's probably 100% of you guys, have a policy that says we only acknowledge credit from a regionally accredited body, right? Well, look at the huge population of individuals that we leave out when we say that. We have several students who are going and accessing schools that are proprietary, maybe technical, may not have that regional accreditation. And when they come to us, we basically say, oh, that's great, we welcome you. We're glad that you're here, but we're not going to acknowledge anything that you've ever done prior to this because you didn't take it at the right place. And so we're really trying to challenge you as transfer advocates to help us influence that, like ask why. And can you create a system and a process that can facilitate that learning and apply it to credentials? Some other ways is if you're seeing the adult learner, they need flexibility, right? Are your institutions talking about different ways of offering programs? Or is it still the traditional 16 weeks in person and having students learn that way? You're going to start to see a trend where the adult learner is going to look for acceleration. And so is your institution talking about accelerated formats and how are you able to support students in that way? Using market research to distinguish yourself from other institutions, because we all know that sometimes students suffer from the paradox of choice, which is too many choices, then they make bad decisions. So it's really good to try to use your market research to kind of distinguish yourself from the institution down the street. And then, of course, increase campus support services. So again, they have unique needs. It's always good to survey students to find out exactly, instead of guessing what the adult learner needs, is to survey them to say, okay, how can we better support you and improve your satisfaction with the transfer experience?
So as Rose was saying about making pathways and access into community college as opposed to the typical vertical transfer that we're all familiar with, we've been working on looking at this transfer credit coming in. And some of the ways that we can do that is, we can work with our workforce partners to see what their needs are and see if we can tailor our curriculum to meet their needs so that it works for everybody, works for our community, and works for our students who obviously are in school because they want to get employed, they want to reach their career and educational goals. GED with honors is another way we've been looking at recently. It's actually being added to our transfer policy this year. If students score at certain levels on the GED test, then they can, if they score at college level, is anybody familiar with that? Like in your state, are you guys doing that? Okay, it's new to us, so I'm tripping over myself here, but if they score into college level work, then, or equal to that, then we can articulate that for credit for them. So by giving them that head start, especially if they hear about it ahead of time, and that's maybe why they are interested in doing that, and then they show up to us, if we're not ready for that, if we haven't looked through that and evaluated it, then that's a false promise to these potential students, and that is not giving them good access. So that's why we wanted to work on that. We do have a handful of students who earn associate's degrees while they're still in high school. They don't get very much sleep, but some of them can do that, and we have a lot of early outreach programs that help students make that happen by offering classes on Saturdays, partially through dual enrollment at their high schools, classes taught by adjuncts, either high school teachers or adjuncts, and then they earn credit from us while they're earning their high school credit, and then some of them actually can reach that associate's degree. Acceleration is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, there's some pluses and some minuses. It's a kind of a philosophical thing. You know, I know that my kids, especially my son who's 18 right now, if he was finishing up his associate's degree right now, I'd be kind of worried about what was going to come next. I think socially that's not the best thing for him, but it does work for a lot of students. And it also can work financially for students who maybe want to earn an occupational degree or complete, let's say, at least their gen ed portion of their degree and then branch off into some other area. So for students who are up for the challenge and really motivated, that's a great way to get them involved in the community college and to be completers. Not admissible yet efforts. Universities in here, you guys all do this? Do you reach out to students who don't meet your criteria, but you say, this is what you need to do when you reapply, so please, no, it's just that you're not admissible yet. It's not a flat no necessarily. So I think that that's important that we in community colleges work with our partners to make a welcoming experience happen for those students so that when they come to us, it's not like this letter of shame or this email of shame where they're like, well, I applied to XYZ University and I didn't get in, so I need to come here and I need to do this. As soon as they share that with an advisor, advisors are great at saying, what they can do and, and telling the student, don't worry, you're going to have a positive experience. We're here to help you. This is how we're going to help you get back to that university or whatever your goal may be at the time you want to leave us. But I think that the communication between partners at the community colleges and the universities can really foster a positive experience in those cases. Establishing collaborative partnerships between public high schools and institutions of higher ed. We have a couple of our colleges. We have 10 colleges in our district. They're separately accredited all across Maricopa County, the most highly populated county in Arizona. So we're a big district. A couple of our colleges have high schools on their college campuses. So the students already get some of those services that are available to college students, and they have a clear pathway available to them, and they already have some of the classes towards those pathways. So that's a neat collaboration there. And working with the high schools to make pathways so that they can be working on deciding what they want to do before that summer or before that admission period or application period time, so that they can get some of those classes underway and that exploration done to figure out what they want to do when they get to us so that they can be more successful. So, career pathways. There's a survey done that was in New America, which is an organization that I've been reading about a little bit, it shows that students apply for very practical reasons. I mean, I'm sure that if you ask a lot of students, they would say, I want to learn, I want to grow as a person, I want to be more educated. But really, by and large, they want to have career opportunities. They want to make money. They want to support their families. They want to have jobs that they like. So the percentage of students who rated those at the very top, as you can see, is very high. Let's see what else to highlight here. The value of a college education has been coming up in some of the literature that I've been reading. That's a tough thing for a college or a university sometimes to prove to the public. But that's something that we need to be thinking about as we reach out, in our marketing efforts and in our outreach efforts for students about what that can do for them. There's statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showing that the higher your education goes, that in general your income goes up. But then those 18-year-olds like my son say, well, what about so-and-so who never even graduated from high school and he's making this much money or whatever. So that's something to consider for sure when you're working with students and with the public. Alumni can be a really great resource in helping students follow these pathways and get into our institutions. A lot of times they're really proud of what they've achieved, and they should be, and they are still in the community or they've returned to the community. And I know at our colleges we can hire part-time people, and sometimes they could be alumni. They could be really great employees, especially like in career services perhaps. And in transfer areas, if you have departments where you can reach out to students in clubs or through not necessarily academic advising, but alumni can be great at that too. So working as mentors, even if it's like a visiting basis as opposed to an employment basis, I think that it is an instant connection when a student sees where somebody has gone with their career and they can trace it back to, you started here, or you started at a community college, across town that's very similar. Thank you. So we're looking at the transfer twist, and when I think of this, besides the lemon analogy there, but I was thinking more of as a rope with all of these areas that are impacted by some of the trends, the higher ed movements that we're talking about, and with all of the different parts of a rope kind of intertwined, that transfer's really twisted into all of this. So all of these areas that are impacted are things that we talk about and work with every day when we work with transfer students and transfer data and pathways and all of that. So I think some of this goes back to what I was just saying on the other slides, but I think that we need to keep applied science degrees, AAS degrees, and alternative credentials in mind. In Arizona, we are trying to grow our AAS to BAS pathways with our public universities. Some of our private and online and out-of-state universities have some great pathways for those. They're very flexible in what they'll accept. But then with the public universities where most of our students go, we need to have a lot of options there that will lead to careers and that are not just going to be really general degrees that might not serve them well as they search for a job. Competency-based learning formats, even if it's not totally switching over your curriculum to competency-based. One of our partners, for example, Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona, they have a handful of majors that they have a personalized learning. Is anybody from NAU here? I know that oh, hi. So they have a handful of degrees that are in this division, I guess you'd say, and it's a competency-based program, and it really gives students a good option to learn a little bit differently, pay one price per, is it semester or? 6 months. 6 months, okay. So it's just a different way of learning, and it's a good option, and I think that's pretty neat. And I think that that's probably easier to create. Not that it was easy, but easier to create than trying to make a major change to competency-based, because we have so much already established that doesn't necessarily need to be changed. Rose talked about expanding our prior learning assessment services and promotion to support working adults. Our students come to us with all kinds of certifications, work experience, credit from non-regionally accredited institutions, and regionally accredited institutions. We need to have a structure in place so that we can evaluate that credit. If we're not even going to evaluate it and have our faculty make those decisions about what can come in, then we're really shutting the door right when they get to us, and that's not access.
So we're going to get into personalization, and you probably heard from the keynote speaker yesterday morning a little bit about personalization. And so we really wanted to cover this topic because we do think that this is could be a successful strategy, and we're trying to explore it within our organization. And personalization is basically making that student feel valued and providing them with the information, the services that they need in order for them to be successful. So going back to that Amazon experience where you buy something and then they say something like, oh, other people that bought this also, so it was kind of making it easier without you having to navigate and go from page to, to scroll through choice after choice. It's tailored content. So it's not only using tailored content to reach individuals, students, consumers. It's also learning formats. So like Kathy had covered, I can't even say it, individualized learning. So it's using kind of that concept of really taking into account, based off of human behavior and analytics, how can we best serve students? And so this should be part of our conversations because, we always use kind of a one-size-fits-all. Or what can we do that's not expensive, that's going to, have the greatest reach? And sometimes that's not always successful. And so we really need to have those tough conversations to say, how can we personalize this experience to increase satisfaction with our students? And so they'll tell you in terms of when you survey them, they'll tell you like how you can better influence the transfer process for them to have a better experience transitioning from one institution to the other. So it's different learning formats, different approaches, academic support strategies, and it's really to provide flexibility from a population that is used to that treatment, right? So if they're getting this best experience from Amazon and other entities like Target, and so they're going to have the same expectations from our institutions, right? That seamless online experience as they're going through the academic process. So some of what you can do is survey students to find out exactly what their needs are. Utilizing people data to solve people problems. I used this analogy yesterday, is that we read data, I'm sure you all get reports and everything about transfer students, but we really need to synthesize and dig down deep in the data to find out what is actually happening. So I think many of you have heard that time and time throughout this conference, is that what do we do with the data? Do we actually utilize it? And do we make an impact based off of those conversations and those decisions? So, and how do we use it to change that experience to enhance the student transition process? Also using your CRMs as a way to begin gathering information and reaching out to students for that personalized experience. And then, you know, universities can utilize personalization to do outreach efforts, you know. So if you know in terms of what the transfer student needs are, or what the personal needs are for your individual students, you could customize outreach efforts to be able to support that, as well as the community colleges in terms of the intent to transfer. So I know for the Maricopa community colleges, we don't do a good job. We don't do a good job at reaching out to our students. Once a student enrolls, we basically encourage them to access academic advising, but we don't set markers or milestones to say after 45 credits, you reach 45 credits, you're almost close to a degree, you should check in to go see an advisor, okay, to find out what's the graduation process. So you could utilize those type of messages to encourage the behavior that you want. And so I know that's an underutilized strategy for Maricopa, and so we're trying to really figure out how we can really enhance that strategy to reach out to our transfer students. So I just thought this was funny because as I was creating this presentation, it kind of took personalization to kind of a next level. So you know that there's times where personalization could be a little creepy, right? Like they're guessing what you already kind of were thinking, and you're like, how did they know that? You know, it's that digital footprint of, oh my God, what kind of information are they gathering on me? So I know that many of our institutions, as we're talking about personalization, won't go there and kind of creep students out, but it's just a good technique for us to keep in mind to feel as though students are valued.
I think one example of the personalization, like I said, I have an 18-year-old, and he's been, you know, he went to his career center and filled out a card, and so now he's getting all this mail from universities. Now my son, of course, like all of us, we think our kids are smart, but his grades are on the bubble. So he's getting this mail, and it's just recruitment. It's recruitment letters. It's not like we want you, Matthew, but it's like, hey, check us out. We have a great university, and he feels special. It means something to him, and I'm thinking, this is one of the kids of today who's always on their phone, but he likes those letters. He has them saved in his room, in his stack, and he's not the most organized kid, I mean, but with that, he's very organized, and it means a lot to him. So I just wanted to let you guys know at the universities that your money is well spent.
Yes. But does that translate? That's the 18-year-old high school. How many of us can say that on the transfer side? Because even me trying to get a kid to complete an entry card, when I'm at the community college, it's like, I don't want that. Mm-hmm.
Right. And you know what? The reality is my son's probably going to go to a community college, which I'll be very happy with. And right now we're just trying to figure it all out because he wanted to apply, because everybody is applying, and he wanted to see if he could get in. And what in reality will probably happen is he's probably going to say, yes, I've decided on you, but I want to go to one of the community colleges where my parents work, you know, for a year, not where we actually work, but in the district. And so then he'll ask if he can defer, and we have to figure out how that all works, so I should probably pick some of your brains. But yeah, with transfer students, He did, in the course of all these applications too that he's been putting in, he did apply to one of our colleges, the one that he's most likely to go to because of it has programs that he's really interested in. And it's not where I work or my husband works, so that was another deciding factor. And of course he got admitted, open enrollment, right? But he was proud of that too. And so he actually, the first university he got into, he bought a hat. And then when he got into Scottsdale Community College in our district, my husband bought him a cap from Scottsdale. And so, he's proud of both. So he's becoming a transfer student, I think. So it's a weird journey. All of the stuff that I've worked with students on has gone out the window. But is that normal?
Because my daughter's the same age, and it's like everyone looks to me like, oh, your kid should be so far along.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
and you should know. They should know exactly what they're doing, and they have great resources. But it's so different when it's your own person in your family, and you know them pretty inside and out, and then you think, well, what's really best for that person? And so I'm very thankful for that, because when I do get a chance to work with students, I mostly work with advisors and university partners, but now when I work with students, I have to think, this person has all of those factors, all of those crazy factors feeding in. We need to try to consider that all as much as possible when trying to serve them.
And that's difficult to do in like a 10-minute advising session. And so I know that more resources can be dedicated to those counselors to be able to have that time to have those conversations with the students to find out exactly what their needs and kind of make them feel valued. If you could click to the next slide. Because that's important. We did, based off of survey information, a common theme that came out from our students was that they wanted to matter to the university. They actually wanted to be recruited, and they sometimes felt that universities didn't really want them. And so as we started to increase our transfer fairs, as we started to get more visibility from our university partners on our campuses, it generated a lot of excitement of, okay, yes, actually they value me, they want me, they're recruiting me. So I think that's something important to keep in mind, and it kind of goes along what Kathy was talking about.
Yeah, they see the partnership, so then they can feel like they're getting started with the whole process. So it's not a choice anymore, almost. It's there's a pathway there for me, and I see that they're working together to serve me, and I can take advantage of that as a student.
So we also wanted to kind of do a twist on personalization and enhancing university partnerships. And I think this is important, especially from a community college perspective, is that, we were back in the day, a decade ago, we were all proud that we had like 60 partners because that showed, universities wanted to partner with us, and, the more the better, and so forth. But as we got into it and as we started to support and the demands that it takes to support these university partnerships, we determined that not always more is better. In fact, there was many of our partners who didn't know the partnership existed. So as students were contacting them, they were like getting the runaround. So that doesn't say much. When you're promoting a university and a student can't find anybody who can speak to the articulation or the partnership, that's not good. And so we started an evaluation process with our university partners. And so we basically had created success metrics. And so based off of those success metrics, we just kind of monitor their participation and whether or not they're living up to their commitments to the agreement. Not only that, we have them provide us with enrollment information. So we use that information in companionship. So we look at the data and we look at the participation level. And if we see that they're not participating and there's no enrollments, then we would recommend discontinuation, because it doesn't make sense to promote a university that is not actively recruiting, supporting, outreaching to our students. And so just literally right before this conference, I sent out 10 Dear John letters, kind of like, based off of this information, we're going to recommend discontinuation. And from half of them, they pretty much came back and said, we agree. We don't have the support, we don't have the resources to be able to participate in the agreement any longer. So what that did was now having 10 partners off of the list frees up resources so that we could dedicate it to those other partnerships that we can strengthen and provide some depth with. So I know from a community college perspective, that's always not easy to do in terms of being able to support the partnerships in the way that you want it because you have limited staff. Even though it's a major mission, it's just that there's only so much you can do. And so if there's a way, we have plenty of resources that we could share with you to be able to help manage those expectations from the universities as well as the resources. So typically, if you just go back real quick, based off of that evaluation, we also redid our MOU, the agreement that we use to formalize partnerships, and we pretty much did it on service level. So for our 3 public universities, they get the top service level, so we have dedicated strategies to implement the partnership. For the second tier, we have those strategies in addition, or actually not all of them, half of those strategies. And then there's a third tier, which is generally institutions that are out of state that they get another set of commitments. And that helped us be able to manage their expectations as well as our resources. So we're starting to send out those MOUs to the universities for them to re-up and reaffirm the partnership. And what's driving this is budget cuts. So for us, we don't have any more staff to be able to support these university partnerships. And so again, it's about return on value. So if we're not seeing the return on value, we have like 1 or 2 students going to the university, yet we do all these activities to be able to support it. It doesn't always make sense, and we have to be accountable with our resources. So what's the transfer twist on this? Well, it's your university partnerships and how you're able to support. I know I heard earlier in the session in terms of how do you, that it takes 2 to tango. It definitely does take 2 to tango. And so, but how do you get out of that relationship if the other person doesn't want to tango? So it's like, so we've developed a way to be able to do that, and it seemed to work. It's also kind of going back to that, personalization concept, that concierge approach, right? Everybody likes to go up to the concierge, and they're really helpful, and they'll give you the information you need, make some recommendations, and so forth. So it's almost kind of trying to provide that type of approach when serving students, whether you're an academic advising, a transfer specialist, an admission counselor, is how do I make that, that student feel valued, and how can I be more helpful in their transfer experience? Again, it's about interventions, student portals, and self-service. So it's really working with your university partners to strengthen those resources because students are accessing them to make decisions.
So the next big idea we're going to cover is nudging. Anybody really familiar with nudging in here? It's been around for a while. It's pretty new to me, though. There was a kind of a seminal book in 2008 that's at the top there on the top bullet point that made the concept popular. And it's, the normal meaning of nudge is to push kind of along. I read some articles that were saying sometimes students need more than a nudge. They need a major push. But I just thought that was kind of funny because it just, reminds us all of a couple situations where sometimes a push works out better. But it's based on behavioral economics, so why people do and don't do things, and getting into that and trying to apply that to help them reach success. So basically, let's say you're in the cafeteria and you go up to the register and they have some fruit there, and they, like maybe grabbing something healthy on the way out is a suggestion there. Sometimes there's junk food too, so that's a different kind of nudge. That's maybe more of a make money type of thing. But I try to think of it as a positive thing. Thaler, one of the authors of this book, said that it's important that nudging is used for good reasons, nudging for good, to help students and their families make informed decisions. It's not to just tell them what to do. So you don't want to be overly directive. You want to give them information that's going to help them make informed decisions. So it's kind of hand-holding in a way, but it's also helping their ability to help themselves.
The example I used yesterday during the session was probably those who flew in probably received a notification or a text from your airline that says time to check in. That's a nudge in terms of, oh, okay, it wasn't directive, it was just subtle, it's just that reminder of trying to check in, And so I always appreciate that because I always get on the C list with something.
Okay, so I did read that, that nudging is not using, it's not based on using like a carrot to pull people towards doing something or a stick to punish them for doing something bad, and it's not about incentives and or punishment. But as soon as I started reading about nudging, it reminded me of, why do I have this humongous watch on when there's really cute Fitbits out there and everything? Well, I'm participating in an Arizona State University study it's walking interventions through texting. So it tracks my walking every day, like a Fitbit does, but they also text me messages on my phone with daily goals and advice. And on that one, I do get gift cards. I have to say, like, I'm not just doing this for fun, but they give me Sephora gift cards, which is kind of cool bonus, but I'm mostly doing it because I want to improve, increase my physical exercise. So I appreciate that nudging, and it's not judgmental. It's I find it helpful. So I thought that was a kind of neat example of real life, my real life. Here's a nudge from Arizona State University. I know it's hard to read, but it's basically like, do you want to find a time when I can help you with the FAFSA so that you can look into scholarships? And it's getting back to personalization, because it's like, I can help you. It's not like, go to this website and look up scholarships, which can be helpful, but this is like somebody reaching out, showing that they care. Now, yeah, this text was used for lots and lots of students, I'm sure. But when you receive it, you know somebody's there who's willing to help you. Okay, so nudging is very tied into marketing and outreach, and of course retention, because if you can remind people what they're doing, what can help them be successful, then it's going to hopefully contribute to them sticking around and completing. And then guided pathways, not just prescriptive pathways with curriculum, but also providing the support to make those pathways feel like a student can really have a well-rounded experience and feel confident and supported all the way through their education. So nudging figures into that, or it can figure into that highly. Does anybody in here have an example of nudging that you do at your college or university? If you think of it later, maybe during the questions, I was just curious, you know, if there were some ideas that people might want to share. A series of text messages. It doesn't always have to be text messages. I know that's one of the examples that we're using a couple times, but kind of reminded me of those billboards that have the different segments, and it really draws your attention in. And a series of text messages, you have to be careful. You don't want to harass people, drive them nuts, or make them feel like you're bossing them around. But sometimes those pieces can be a continuous reminder that can lead to further success. We also need to make sure that if we're nudging students, that we have a solid infrastructure there to support them. We want them to, let's say, okay, we know students who are full-time generally do better. I know that's such a broad statement, but full-time students generally perform better. So if we want to help them, you know, by reminding them how many credits are full-time, or we notice that you have a part-time schedule, are you good with that? Can I help you look at some other classes to consider being full-time this semester, or something like that? It might not work for everybody, but what do we recognize that makes students successful at our institutions? And so use nudging just for that, and then have the real human resources there to support them when they say, I got a reminder about this, or I saw, you know, a flyer, you know, about a workshop from a transfer partner, and you know, where is that? And then, you know, they come up to the front counter sometimes, and it's kind of embarrassing, but they come up to the front counter and advisement, and nobody told the people in the front what was going on, so they don't know what the flyer is. We don't want that to happen. We need to make sure that we're communicating so that we can support the nudging. Oops, sorry guys, I'm upside down here. All right, moving on, reinventing credentials, considering alternate credentials and microlearning. So for a long time, it was degree, get your degree, and still in a lot of families and a lot of communities, we do want students to graduate. We do want them to get their degrees, but that's not what everybody wants or necessarily needs. We need to think about smaller or shorter types of programs like certificates. I mean, the community colleges are great at them. Universities have quite a few certificates now too. So that's something that you can really partner with the community and the workforce on, are those certificates and smaller, shorter types of programs.
Yeah, and we wanted to make sure that was included because it does come back to the curriculum, and if we're starting to see changes at the community college and how we deliver certificates, it really does challenge the notion of credit. What does credit actually mean? Is it that standard seat time? Is it the amount of time that they spend in the classroom? So if they're taking shorter bursts of gaining competencies, it's going to really kind of challenge that notion of what is really a credit and what is it worth.
Okay, and so tying in back with personalization, microlearning is a kind of new trend that we could use to help our students. And so it's delivering content, like Rose said, in smaller little bursts, and it can be, you know, it kind of speaks to the media, how media has changed and technology has changed over the last maybe 20 years or so, that, you know, shorter, more impactful pieces as opposed to longer, more traditional, and maybe even people like us standing in front of you for an hour, you know, that can be more effective. So we need to think about and help our faculty think about too, and they already do. They're exploring creative ways to reach students in different formats and make an impact. Students who have problems focusing or have problems with time management, maybe we can, you know, tailor things towards them and then work as advisors or faculty advisors to connect our students to formats that work for them. We all have those conversations with students about online versus in-person instruction and what's going to work for them. And just because online's more convenient in some ways, is it the right fit for everybody? No, not necessarily, but it depends on the student and all their circumstances. So same thing with shorter programs and different types of like modalities and techniques of teaching. Oh, and then also, of course, different modules could be used on different devices. So sometimes that can be helped out with a grant too, with pilots and things like that. Okay, so this just kind of wraps that part up. We want to make sure that the articulation of certifications is part of our PLA practices. So we want to make sure that if our students are coming to us with a Microsoft certification or an early childhood certification or something like of that from another institution perhaps, or through their work, their workplace, then we need to make sure that we can at least evaluate that and consider it and see how it might equate to our credits so that they can roll that into something else if they would like to do that. I think the other ones were covered. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I know we have limited time, but I do want to cover this. And in fact, where I learned it from LMU is that micro scholarships, and it's the concept of the challenges that we face in terms of promoting scholarships to students. And there's a different way of doing that. We could do it better, right? So in looking at some of the reasons why and the challenges that students experience is sometimes it's student search fatigue, right? They're out there looking for the right scholarship, the right fit for them, and sometimes they get so exhausted that they just don't explore it, right? So we have to figure out what's a better way of presenting that information. Typically, it's a decentralized model. It would be great if it was a centralized management model so that they can access, you know, a place where they can see all of their options and available scholarships for them. And then, you know, many scholarships are focused on need, merit, and major, but may be missing other success measures and predictors. And so on the next slide, I came across this at one of my meetings, is the Raise Me, and it's a social enterprise focused on motivating high school students. So it's encouraging high school students to do behaviors, like take an AP class and you could earn $200 in a scholarship. And you could go to any of these universities that will accept that scholarship. So it's really kind of incentivizing them to do those behaviors that we want them to do prior to transitioning to our institutions. So it's kind of an award based off of achievements. And so like if you're the class president of your school, you get $500. So it's actually reversing the model in terms of I get to see my scholarship dollars before I transition to whatever institution. Instead of waiting to enroll at the institution, then applying, and then find out whether or not you do get a scholarship or not, can impact transfer decisions.
It's kind of in the bag for them when they get there, right?
Right, so they're earning scholarship dollars as they go. So when I attended that session, Raise Me, I asked, well, what about transfer students? Like, can we build a platform for that? And they basically said yes. As a matter of fact, we have a beta test with ASU and Florida International. And I always find it funny when you go out of state to find out what your state institutions are doing. I didn't know that they were participating in the beta testing. But you know, this would be a great way to encourage degree completion, right? So if you complete an associate degree, you get $2,500, you know, you get guaranteed admission. So we have a meeting with ASU to figure out how we can work together and partner to build in those behaviors prior to transferring to the university. Because right now for Raise Me, it's a high school to university. And then we also I asked the question about high school to community college, and so that's going to take a little longer conversation. But we just wanted to introduce the concept to you because I think it's worthwhile to explore. I found it useful, and I'm hoping that some way or somehow we can participate in that effort. And then I'll just quickly wrap up with globalization, the same type of thing in terms of we're starting to see more movement about institutions going out and trying to recruit international students, mainly not only for success, but for revenue. So, you know, if we could get more students into our institutions and our colleges, then it helps, and it provides diverse opportunities and diversity in our classrooms. And so you're going to see a big movement of individuals and colleges recruiting and facilitating transition of international students into our institutions. If you go
partnerships with international institutions as well, like the opportunity.
Yeah, so we felt it at Maricopa. Being a large community college district, we get the privilege or the pleasure, or sometimes it's not. We get contacted all the time by institutions who want to partner with us. And so last year, we pretty much got contacted by 10 institutions in the UK. And they wanted to partner with us because they wanted diversity at their institution. So they wanted to recruit students to go abroad. And so at that time, we didn't have a strong articulation process for that. We didn't have a good vetting process. And so what it forced us to do is really kind of strengthen our international guidelines and articulation. Like, who are we going to partner with? And can we trust this institution? If we're going to promote them and we're going to promote it to students and they're going to go abroad, we need to make sure that we do a very good vetting process. And so we worked with our faculty, we worked with our administration, we created an application for international institutions. And so now we can basically have that available if we get approached. Also for identifying funding resources for non-nationals. I just was contacted by NAU. They were looking at ways to provide scholarship or waivers for F1 students because they know it's costly for these students to attend institutions. And so they're trying to figure out how can we make it more affordable for these students to access our programs and our institution. So it's really kind of exploring that opportunity and how you could grow the diversity of your classrooms to better enhance the student experience. And also, again, it's a strategic enrollment management plan. And I think that's it. And just to wrap up, in addition to those higher concept themes, what we really wanted to do during this session was to challenge you to think outside of the box. Again, sometimes being in the field and being a practitioner, we focus on what we can do on a day-to-day basis. But where do you want your institution to be in 20 years? because sometimes it takes a lot for you to make those type of changes to influence how you are in 20 years. So what we're talking about takes time to implement. And so we really wanted to have you think about, are you prepared to be, to meet the needs of the new learner and to provide them with that experience that they're looking for. So in addition to the trending issues, we've identified that, many of us are going through eroding support, not only at the statewide level, but at the national level. We're starting to see changes in the education model. Many of our institutions are talking about how do we transform our institution to be ready to be, that future student. As well as the Me Too movement, how is that impacting your campuses? And then also kind of reckoning with the racist past and the current racial issues. So we just drew those kind of themes outside of that article and inside higher education. And it's just something to think about and have conversations at your institution around those areas.
They also did one going into 2017 too, and they're still very useful and applicable, so you might want to check those out.
Okay, and then the next one. Okay, and I think that's, just the transfer test, okay. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Yeah, Kate and I work together. We work at Catholic Community College up in Cleveland area, so we represent a 2-year institution, and we have several partnerships with 4 years. There's a lot of 4-year schools around Northeast Ohio. And some of our premier partners, for those that know with tiers and things like that, one of our questions are, do your partners know what tier they fall under when it comes to that? Yes. And secondly, what are some good eligibility? Because some of our premier partners we find, and although we're on the ground with students, we don't necessarily work with the data, but we're wondering why there are premier partners if our students are transferring there. And because money talks, if they're buying into our institution, if that's the only reason why. So what are some eligibility pieces that you have with your partners that makes that partnership work, where you can identify if it's not working, and you can have that conversation, honest conversation of what's going to be best interest for both these institutions?
Yeah, so we improved our vetting process. So before we enter into a partnership, we share success metrics with our partners. We basically say these are our expectations. And so we share beforehand because we give the partner the opportunity to say whether or not they think that they can support that before they get into the partnership. And so many of them do. And so some of those items are like dedicated scholarships, dedicated resources, visibility on the campus, providing us with the data, surveying students. So there's a bunch of commitments. So we're pretty demanding. But anyways, but it works out for the student. So we do have those already established. They review those. If they commit to those, then we go on to the next level, the application level. No, to answer your questions, they don't know what services they get because we have 3 different MOUs. For the 3 public universities, obviously, they get the highest tier because they get the majority of our students. And for political reasons, we basically do whatever we can to make those partnerships successful. And then those other local institutions. So Grand Canyon University has a huge presence in our area. They have a ground campus there. So of course you're going to get more resources and services than, say, somebody from the East Coast who probably visits our campus once a year. But they really don't know that because based off of the MOU and their commitment level. And so if they ever approached us and say, well, we want to expand it, we would have to have that conversation at that time.
It's not that those, premier, what we call signature partnerships are getting better service. They're just getting more because of the students' demand for it and the type of institution it is and the type of partnership support that's needed to make that transfer successful. So with ASU, where about 50% of our students who transfer go, we have to have really detailed articulation agreements, and we have to have certain structures in place so that we can support that successful transfer. And with an institution who's maybe in England or across the country or is online only, and we're not their major partner either, then we can agree like this is what we all can do to be successful and be good with that. It doesn't mean if we're not partners with them or if they're on a different level that we can't work on the behalf of students to advocate for them and for our seamless transfer as much as possible.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes.
So
I know when we were talking about the ELA, the test scores, and the limitations on credits or on the time frame that the student can utilize the credit. I do have a question about, just a philosophical question about it. So we've kind of grappled with this. We don't really have that, but we do have departments that want requisite checking. They don't want students that are coming in for courses that have been taken it 10 years ago. We also have students who come in who have taken the majority of their content a long time ago. Maybe they just need 1 or 2 classes to finish that degree, but then we have an issue about, well, half of your program was 10 to 15 years ago, only 2 of your classes are today, so when we put you out in the marketplace, it looks kind of, employers look at us like, is this a prepared student in today's field? Are they current on today's topics? And so I think that's part of the other conversations with faculty members when you're talking about limitations on time frame.
Oh, I agree with that. Because, I mean, do you want somebody who's going to go into pharmacy, take their science classes 30 years ago? You know, like something like if they're recurring, you want them to have that updated content. So we struggle with that. So in areas where it does make sense, like IT and where it changes, the field changes rapidly, it's totally understandable. But where we're talking about is we have students who have a baccalaureate degree, and our faculty won't waive them out of critical reading. You know, so that's like a barrier. And I'm like, that does not make sense. And so we have many students leaving our institution without a credential because they didn't want to take that critical reading test because they're like, I already know how to read. I got a bachelor's degree, you know? So it's those kind of conversations that you need to challenge the faculty to basically say, I get it, you value critical reading, we do too, but where it makes sense, where it's like the actual student who's going through the process. But if it's somebody who's went on and have an advanced degree, then we could probably try to have a compromise on that.
It's an opportunity for prior learning assessment to come in too. If our faculty can, if they want to create some form of assessment so that we can see where the student really is, and then it works for everybody. But I mean, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for taking the time to spend this afternoon and enjoy the rest of the conference.